Welcome to Happily Ever Aftermath, the podcast that explores the movies that influenced how we view love and romantic relationships. Yes, there will be spoilers. I'm your host, Diana Rojek Skonnord. Because once you've tasted it, that's all you want to drink. We're talking about Casino Royale from 2006, and I am joined by my own James Blonde. Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Diana. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah. So this is your pick. And I'm very curious what you'll have to say about why you chose Casino Royale. But for those of you who don't understand this gigantic mega franchise starter from 2006, let's see here. From IMDb, after earning 00 status and a license to kill, secret agent James Bond sets out on his first mission as 007. Bond must defeat a private banker funding terrorists in a high-stakes game of poker at Casino Royale, Montenegro. That's what the description says. Cast includes Daniel Craig, Ava Green, Mads Mikkelsen, Judi Dench, Jeffrey Wright, and in my opinion, he didn't speak enough in this particular role. I wouldn't call it a waste because anytime you have Jeffrey Wright, it's never a waste. But you also have Giancarlo Giannini, Caterina Marino, Simon Abkarian, Isaac Di Bancole, and Jesper Christensen as Mr. White. So I did all of that as a kind of a jumping off point for you to say it was Mr. White, wasn't it? That's why you wanted to have this conversation.
It could,
because he kind of carries over into the next one, and then and then you have more. They actually interwoven the stories pretty well. Okay, it's the beginning of a franchise, and things carry forward, and it's all difficult. And he was also the last name I read. Okay, fine, it was for Vesper.
I was going to say, yeah, I get it. There's a lot of white people in this movie.
Vesper Linda, is that the reason?
Well, that's definitely the relationship that we're going to be talking about. That's I'm almost positive that's the only pair of people who can be said to have fallen in love with each other during the story.
I don't know. I mean, he does get 2 girls for every movie, right?
That is the formula, yeah.
Yes. Oh, formulaic. That's a harsh criticism.
It's not a criticism.
I was
Formula
joking.
is good. Formula is where we get structure from. And it's particularly interesting because I only started really kind of engaging with the James Bond franchise in the Pierce Brosnan days because that's when I was of age for it. Saw some of the older stuff as time went on, of course, but even then it was very regular. There was the initial Bond girl that he hooks up with, who is usually a villain and invariably dies. And then the second one, who he's still together with at the end of the movie, who usually lives. And in the Daniel Craig era, he has a very bad success rate with the second girl dying.
Spoiler for every movie up to this point with Daniel Craig.
About half of them. Spoiler for half of the movies, but we won't tell you which ones are which.
Coin flip, spoiler for...
Except for Casino Royale. We're definitely going to spoil that.
Yes, as is the formula for this podcast.
Yes.
All right. Yeah.
And yeah, I appreciate being able to talk about another one of these movies that's, has a romantic relationship in it, but is so far outside the romance genre. I don't exactly want to pigeonhole myself with, my previous appearances around The Bourne Identity and Enemy at the Gates, and I know this isn't a similar vein. And yes, I certainly watch other movies outside of action movies and enjoy romances that are more the primary focus of the film. But you have so many good guests to cover all of those, and I suppose this is just my niche because digging into, there's actually a lot of substance in the emotion here and sort of the story around the action plot. That's just something that I'm into. It's something that I think about a lot.
Well, something that really concerned me about this, especially if these are the movies that influenced you, and you use the word influence loosely because it's my podcast and I use that word and I like to talk to you, so I just ask you to pick a movie.
Yeah, sure.
And so for... Okay.
I would say more resonated than influenced in this case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a good way to put it. What was rewatching this for the podcast and saying okay, so this movie feels like 2006, and I don't really consider to be like the early 2000s to have a certain type of like aesthetic, you know, especially with the 90s retrending with like the certain styles that you'll see in like the movie 10 Things I Hate About You, where it's certain colors and certain cuts and high-waisted jeans and all this other stuff. But this movie feels like the 2000s with the certain type of technology when it comes to the highly technological, gadgety.
I would say flip phones and poker are as much 2006 as high-waisted jeans or bell-bottoms or whatever it might be another year or decade. So.
But we also have to look at the James Bond types of movies, because as I was watching this, I know big budget movies will do this, but for some reason I felt like they were really not. Since IHOP and Man of Steel have I felt brands being like shoved into my eyeballs in ways that were irritating me in a way where I had to say something. And so my running commentary was Sony.
There was a lot of Sony and the Ericsson and Vio brands. I found it.
And the camera.
And the camera, yes.
And the camera. Don't forget the camera.
Yeah, I found it only moderately intrusive. Like I could think of other movies where the product placement is like a bit more obnoxious, but I mean, and it does blend in because like, you know, this is the kind of movie where you expect like a lot of high tech junk to be on the screen, and some of it has a logo and some of it doesn't, and if you're not really watching for it,
James Bond rented a Ford. I could tell because I saw that he rented a Ford.
Ford Aston Martin? That doesn't sound right.
Yeah, I know, right? It was very confusing. And
I will say the conversation about the wristwatch, I'll make an exception for that. That was a little bit too blatant for my taste. Omega, beautiful. It's like, jeez.
Right. Okay.
Someone couldn't get out of the contract with that one.
I don't know. I will never buy these products.
I'll never buy it.
Not because of this movie, but because I can't afford this shit.
If it weren't for this movie, I would have never pronounced it Omega. I would have just thought it was Omega.
I thought Omega. I was like, oh geez, I don't know this brand.
Better than a Rolex.
I was about to say
James Bond says.
I slowly put my Casio away. Not a Swatch girl. That's the 90s. Or not. I don't know. But back to what I was saying about the Bourne Identity, it's just, I remember when this movie came into the, you know, the advertisements of this, and it's just like, it's clearly trying to run with the Bourne Identity and Mission Impossible, where it's just like James Bond, it's fun and it's quote unquote campy in its own way of how ridiculous this guy can just do everything and be everything. And I'm gonna ski down a oil pipeline or so. I never saw that James Bond, but
I think we talked about this during the episode where we discussed the Bourne Identity, and yeah, I feel like that was true of a lot of movies. That I'm sure it had a lot of influences. A part of it is just sort of the zeitgeist pendulum, and sort of the, you know, explosion of movie discussion on the web was probably a factor in it. People were getting a lot more cynical and jaded about tropes and cliches, and I feel like lots of different genres were kind of grappling with like, how realistic do we want to be, and how do we want to sort of interweave realism and verisimilitude with like you know, the stuff that makes the genre fun. You know, like the Avengers movies got started in that same decade, and with, you know, like the Iron Man trilogy, they were kind of feeling out this new, it's like, oh, the characters behave like real people. They're not just like cartoon people, but you still get the cartoon action. And
right. So, or Batman Begins, where it's just like, It's Scarecrow, but the Scarecrow is meant to be a hallucinogenic, effect for the sake of a realistic something for a villain.
Yeah. A lot of that going on, and Casino Royale was very much, you know, the James Bond's, you know, stab at that sort of reinvention.
But I also want to throw something out there that it's like, it was a snake eating its own tail, in that you can really feel this because of two words: parkour. And so when you're watching that in the beginning,
no, it's pronounced poker.
Poker. Okay. Thank you.
Parkour.
I will be corrected, and I accept your help. Thank
you.
You're
talking about the free running of the initial scene.
So the thing is, it's badass.
Oh, totally.
But again, the snake eating its tail, you've got this movie doing it because it took what Bourne did and it wanted to take it up a notch. And then Kingsman happened. And so by the time that the last Bourne movie took place, you've got Jason Bourne doing that, and I'm just like, this just feels gross in the trailer of just like, it's Jason Bourne, he jumps into a window.
Yeah, so much followed the leader, and it was fascinating. When we were watching the movie, you stopped and asked me like,
where did it start?
Yeah, like what movie was it playing Follow the Leader with? What movie kicked off this whole parkour fad? And I was like, it was this movie. This was very fresh and original when this came out.
Yes, and what was kind of off about it is, you talk about formula, and I know they were trying to be different, but at the same time not alienating people. And I'm just like, okay, here is the scene where we have the action scene, so we could set off the whole thing about the action scene. And thank God, at the very least, that action scene actually had something to do with the rest of the movie. Whereas a lot of the times it's like Mission Impossible. It's just like, all right, get Tom Cruise on the side of it's Mad Libs. Get Tom Cruise on the side of a blank, while timeline for when blank is going to X blank, or possibly M blank. And it's fine. It's just that I don't like. It's just like the Bourne movies. Was that this one, or was that this one where this and this and this? I can't get the Rogue Nation and the Ghost Protocol and the Supremacies and the Royales with cheese movies in these franchises. They all blend together, and thank God they have the lead character. Yeah, the only way you can really define it is the rotating, like, possibly love interest, or like, oh no, they're in a long-term relationship now. Crap.
Yeah, and the Bond franchise after Casino Royale did kind of start to disappoint me with time. They did start to become a little bit more undifferentiated. I actually like Quantum of Solace a lot more than other people, but and
when was
Skyfall
the last time you saw it?
Quantum of Solace? Yeah, I think I maybe rewatched it once after it came out.
Okay, because I was reading some things about Quantum of Solace, and I'm just like, oh, I know you enjoyed Quantum of Solace more than the reviewers did, but the things you're like, Skyfall was good. I'm like, no, honey, people love Skyfall.
Skyfall was very good, yeah. Spectre was
a mess.
Yeah.
I will say it. I will fall on the sword for you.
I wanted to like it so much, and there are definitely aspects of it that I'll defend, but yeah, like at the point it was just kind of like doing the mythology building and the world building, and everyone loves Christoph Waltz, but it's like
So what's great is that I was reading the bummer about reading trivia about the James Bond movie is that I'm going to have to scroll through 17 entries of this injury held up shooting for this. This was for this brand, and this was for this brand, and these were the people who were considered. And it's going to be the same trivia over and over again, except they're going to change the name of the people. But flipping through, like, so Quantum of Solace, that took place. The script writing happened, and then there was a writer's strike.
Right.
And so the whole thing about the rights to certain things, like, they couldn't get Blofeld because of the rights issue between like MGM and the original, people, the studios who had acquired rights as, the franchise continued on. And so they wanted to introduce Spectre, but instead they had to create Quantum.
And then 2 movies later, they established that Quantum was essentially just like a front or a code name for Spectre.
Yeah, it's kind of like how Star Wars and Marvel and freaking, what was the last one? They're Star Wars, Marvel. Oh, the point is Disney owns everything now.
Yeah, like how there was that whole rights snafu over the character of Quicksilver for a while, and then they were able to unify that.
And Spider-Man and all this other stuff. But again, we know this kind of stuff now. Whereas, like, I remember your mom talking about how she could figure out what was going to happen in a soap opera because, like, well, the person did not renew their contract. And so, like, she was able to do that. I'm just like, yeah, but then the rights for this, so how is this going to happen? Oh, okay, never mind. Oh, they were on set? Hooray! So maybe this is going to happen. And then before you know it, the entire internet has pieced together all of the movie.
Diana, there is such a thing as engaging with a movie a little too much.
I don't understand.
Yeah, me neither. I have definitely had time to obsess over this movie over the years. I mean, maybe obsess is being a little bit too harsh on myself, but I definitely think it holds up and it works as a very like sublimely good self-contained movie in a way that the later ones don't, and that's why I've come back to it and just enjoyed rewatching it so consistently, like independently of the rest of the franchise.
So I don't want to be the angry, sad-faced person as we go through this movie. So I'm going to try my best to like give my thoughts while not being so angry. And I'm going to try to underline all of it with, it wasn't for me. as we go through. I didn't feel it. It didn't do it for me. And when I go for that, you were saying, a pretty good self-contained. What's difficult for that is this was a franchise being established. So it can't really be that self-contained in any way that can be like this. So much of it is just like, hey, the 40 plus years of like all of this mythology. That was a reference to that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like compared to some of these other franchises, like the comic book franchises and stuff, I kind of thought like the meta content was, it was definitely there, but I thought they used a fairly light touch with it.
And I'll say that when I watched this for the first time, which we saw this in the theater together.
We did.
Yes. So I'll admit that my expectations were low because I had only seen GoldenEye and that was it. Mm-hmm. So when you only have GoldenEye and then you're just like, hey, this is cool. Oh, this is really, really deep. This is gritty. This is more Bourne Identity, which I appreciate and I think is pretty interesting. Cool. But in rewatching it, and I'm just like, all right, now do the thing. All right, now do the thing. And...
So maybe it would help if I explained a bit what I mean about this working as a self-contained story, which I think is maybe going to be helpful because it directly concerns the relationship between James and Vesper, which it is definitely part of a franchise. You can see that it fits into a franchise, and the main arc is the development of James Bond from whoever the character is at the beginning of the movie to the more closely conforming to the archetype, the James Bond that we've known through all these different actors in different movies at the end of the movie. That's his personal change that he goes through. That's his beginning, middle, and end. And his relationship with Vesper, I think, also has a very satisfying arc to it, a very coherent beginning, middle, and end, which I think that does kind of fit within the movie. So that's what I'm describing as self-contained.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand. I raised my hand because I would say, did you say satisfying ending?
Is this going to be the whole thing where like sort of an emotionally harsh or cathartic ending is I tend to find those a bit more satisfying and you tend to find them a bit more frustrating and not really buy into the whole catharsis theory?
Well, I don't want to get too far into that because I don't know what that means, nor do I care to find out. However, when you say satisfying, like I don't consider it satisfying to watch Vesper make these decisions.
Yeah.
And then M says, "Oh, by the way, we found out this about her and this and this and this." And we can only speculate. So that way I don't really have, in fact,
not really into speculating, are you? This isn't that kind of podcast.
I told you I didn't like Spectre at all. And sometimes I forget which one was which. So, okay. Yes, speculating to a point. But the thing is, I can only work with so much. Mm-hmm. And because they're giving me a very, very, very entertaining action movie, I don't want to use my energy to speculate. Now, if this was okay, first of all, she also shows up 58 minutes into the movie.
Yes. You asked me to pause and look. So.
Yes, and then fortunately it was in trivia. So, so yes, there is that. So I'm working with an hour and 24 minutes of their interaction together, which is fine. I mean, yeah. I enjoy a good 90-minute rom-com.
And as I was kind of trying to describe, I think there are two halves to that arc. There's the arc that happens between James and Vesper, and the arc that's just kind of James alone. And I would say that arc begins well before Vesper shows up. In fact, his tryst with Solange, that's the kind of first bad guy's wife. I think there's a lot of meat there that I'm probably going to want to come back to later.
Maybe. I would also say that you also watch his there's no really point in like kind of maintaining my identity. He knows I'm here. And then he gas point when M's just like, is there anything that can trace us back to you? No. I'm like, except for she fucking knew your name, jackass. If I'm being tortured in any of the ways that they showed, I can't even imagine how Solange was tortured off screen. Mm-hmm. So whatever it was, they're going to know everything. I'm sorry, honey. They're going to know all of your secrets. I will tell them everything if I'm being tortured that way. So now...
Wait, when did he say... You're talking about when he said his name checking into the hotel?
No, I'm talking about... Later, yeah. No, because Solange, when they were making out, she's like, blah, 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 James, blah, 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 James.
Did she?
Yeah.
No, I remember.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a first name isn't that much to go off of.
I
though.
know it's not, but at the same time, it's not nothing. Especially in the spy game, where all they have to work with is like the tiniest things, and then they're able to run with it.
Well, what if he used his clever alias James Stock, like in that god-awful Roger Moore? Oh, I hate that movie so much. Sorry.
Okay. No comment, as I have not seen that one.
Yes, you have. I don't blame you for forgetting it though. That was
Wait, which one?
A View to a Kill.
I haven't seen A View to a Kill.
Oh, I thought we watched that because it was so bad. Maybe that was just me by myself. Okay. It was featured on at least one other bad movie podcast.
Of course, but no. I will go back and... Was that the pigeon one?
Yeah, the pigeon one.
I haven't seen the pigeon one.
Okay. With Christopher Walken.
Okay, was that the pigeon one where Tom Cruise was climbing up the tallest building of all?
Honestly, it could have been in there. It was such a mess.
Again, don't know the things. Okay, here's the deal. Let's talk, much like the movie itself, we're going to talk for 58 minutes, and then we're going to get into the introduction of Vesperland.
Yes.
So, this was your pick. This movie resonated with you. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, as I said, I did want to come back to it and rewatch it at first because I just felt it cohered as a very satisfying action movie. I liked the action choreography. You know, as you mentioned, the parkour was very novel for the time, and I think the same could be said for some of the fight choreography as well. I really enjoyed the poker scenes. I just have a thing.
Poker?
Both. Yeah. I mean, I have an affinity for any kind of like a high stakes game being integrated into a movie plot with implications outside of the game itself. That's just one of my like pet favorite plot devices. I'm such a sucker for that. And over time, after rewatching a few of those scenes repetitively, Diana, you know a lot about that. I kind of started exploring out the rest of the movie, and it just struck me how there was like a lot of substance to the romance arc, like not compared to like the non-action genre, but more than I remembered, and it just struck me of like, oh, the screenwriting and the acting actually have a certain degree of subtlety going on here, and I look forward to unpacking a bit of that in a few moments. And also, yeah, just Eva Green is like so ridiculously talented. Just rewatching it, these little things like the way the way her eyes dart around in response to another line. It's just like, oh, she's putting a lot into this character. There's a lot going on under the surface.
I mean, it's James Bond, so there's going to be sexy banter, and they definitely started off quickly, and I think when it happened, it was effective. But for me, I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but my radar instantly was on for romance tropes.
Sure.
And so I didn't grab all of them, but I don't know if this is a trope per se, but I just don't want to have the whole like, oh, this is the ladies' man and this is the smart girl, but the thing is she's also gorgeous. And then he immediately not dresses her down, but but talks about the whole like, oh, and you dress like this and these shapes because that way you're gonna, you're beautiful, but that's a problem because you're gonna, not get promoted because no one's gonna take you seriously, even though you are smart. Yeah,
totally. I'm not going to describe those as being not cliche, and in fact I think that kind of goes with like the larger strategy of the movie, where it knew that the franchise had a lot of baggage, and it's like, what are we going to do with these cliches? Are we going to indulge in meta commentary on them, or very self-consciously try to subvert them? And they wound up somewhere in the middle. And if you found those parts, those aspects of the screenplay cheesy, I'm not going to disagree with you, because it was a very self-conscious thing that they were doing. But I also think that there was...
I hope it was. If it wasn't...
Oh, totally, yeah. But I think there was kind of meta commentary or like a thesis that they were building up to that does kind of fit into like, this is a franchise beginner. This is an origin story, not even too different from like Batman Begins. It's like, James Bond starts off as this relatively ordinary person. He's still a secret agent, but he's, maybe not the...
Anyone who was in those levels of like Secret Service, I would not call them ordinary.
Yeah.
Well, also orphan. Also...
Yeah. But, I mean...
Let's just say ordinary person up until a certain age, and then highly trained and etc.
He was the James Bond version of an ordinary person. I will cite as evidence that initial scene, the black and white cold open scene about how he, killed his very first enemy in the field ever, and it's implied that, like, yeah, he was not actually totally cold-blooded about it. It made you feel it, did he? I think was the line. And the second is easier. Well, so, yeah, I mean, and they're, like, establishing, like, he's, still a highly trained secret agent and has, like, far more detachment from all of this stuff than any person you meet would. But nonetheless, he still has, these human emotions. He got shaken up when he had to kill someone for the first time.
Well, also, which is helpful, not in terms of the formula, but if I were speaking of the formula of just, like, James Bond, this happens, it's a double cross, it's a double cross, and then it's over, and then James Bond gets through this, and he has the victories and like the defeats through it. It was pointed out in trivia. Yeah, he fails at all of these things as you go along. So he tries to get the bomber in the first scene, and he does not bring him back alive. He tries to get information, and I guess you could suppose all of it was just really fucking messy, we'll just say.
Yeah,
because
which serves the interest of the story. Would you agree?
Well, how about this? It's being done sloppily, whereas like James Bond is just like, oh no, it's not going to this, but at least he's like pivoting and he's still making it happen, but he still looks good. In this one, he does well. Okay.
I mean, the sloppiness is definitely like a conscious choice.
There's the gritty factor. There's the fact that he's still fresh.
Yeah.
And then,
I think even that's being set up in the parkour scene where, he's keeping up with this guy who is like, this very slick parkour expert. He has all these moves. He's, climbing over things. It's all very elegant and graceful. And Bond is kind of making up for it through brute force, bursting through walls.
I was actually waiting for him to say I'm too young for this shit, which is just only because he's like the youngest one, I suppose. I don't know. Yeah. I'm too blonde for this shit. I don't know. People are really upset about that.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they were just still sensitive from Roger Moore. Those were. I'm not a fan of those movies.
What color was his hair?
Blondish.
Oh, okay. Well, we've learned our lesson then.
Sure. Huh. Anyway, to close my loop on the sort of thesis about like this is a movie about Bond becoming the James Bond archetype that we all know. I think the point of his romantic arc with Vesper, that beginning, middle, and end I was talking about, is like this is his lesson in how to become detached in personal relationships. Because you think about, and if you go far back enough, there are going to be exceptions, with like, that depict James Bond actually falling in love or actually, becoming various degrees of attached. And in fact,
that's the only one I've seen.
I was going to say, you appeared on a podcast discussing On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is very much about James Bond falling sincerely in love and getting married and being promptly and unceremoniously widowed. Widowed, as these things go. And I feel like this is his relationship with Vesper. It's not supposed to feel like the James Bond but by the time the story is over, it's like, this is how he's gotten there. This is how he's learned this perhaps unfortunate lesson of, not getting attached, not falling in love, and how painful and dangerous it is, and not just because you could lose the person you love, but also because they could betray you, and both of those things happened. Spoiler, yes. And in fact continued to love her even after the betrayal, or that's a matter for interpretation. But
right, and going back to that speculation part that we were talking about earlier, I mean, we do have to make the decision of, how much of the other movies inform what we're going to talk about right now.
Right.
I mean, if we go with precedence, the other ones were not written by and or directed by the same person, because you got Sam Mendes in there later on. So, how we want to run with that. I'm going to cite precedents and say it doesn't matter.
Yeah, we can be very flexible with canon and continuity if we choose to, as many viewers are in this savvy age of viewership.
So this relationship resonated with you in the canon as a whole. Anything else you want to point out in terms of like their own interactions or your own personal thoughts about the relationship itself?
Oh yeah, I mean there were a lot of moments that on my initial viewing I kind of took it in as like, there's this kind of up and down rhythm that all action movies have, where there are the action beats with the kind of filling in the story and the drama beats in between scenes, like just almost any scene with like an extended dialogue between James and Vesper where they're kind of building up. And like one that stuck out to me in particular was the scene in the hospital after he's been rescued from kidnapping, and if we didn't know any better, we could sort of think it's like the falling action of the movie where the bad guy's been eliminated and they're just kind of tying up loose ends. And
which is fascinating because we've got like 30 more minutes left of this movie.
Right, of course. And of course the plot does open up again, but it's like this very down moment. And the first few times I saw the movie, I didn't find it all that significant. Like I wasn't bored, but it didn't stand out to me as like sort of the emotional fulcrum of the movie. And on rewatching, I kind of realized, oh, it really does. Like this is past the point of when did they fall in love, or at least I think at that point they're both just sort of like openly professing to each other with affection. Pretty sure it's also after they've had sex for the first time. And as they're just sort of like talking to each other, more, not in so many words, but like just how happy they are to be in that relationship. I think Bond says something about, Vesper had mentioned something about him having his armor on. And, he says, there's no armor left. You've stripped me bare, which I think that little exchange fascinates me because I think it goes straight to the sort of thesis of like, this is the thing that after the story is over and as we're getting into the rest of the franchise, that Bond is probably never going to let happen again. Like letting the armor down and letting a woman he loves strip him bare is going to have consequences. It has consequences in the remaining 30 minutes of the movie. And also, and this is what I was talking about, where there's like substance going on under the surface. When you think that Vesper has been lying about her motives from the beginning, that she is still intending to betray Bond in order to steal the money, despite the fact that she's not lying about being in love with him, that, once the movie's over, and if you rewatch that scene a second time, you have to think, oh, she's still got her armor on, or at least enough of it to maintain the secret. And, what's going on inside her head? Is she feeling guilty? Is she feeling like, oh, there's like like double standard isn't even like the right word for it, but like the fact that she knows she's on an uneven footing with this man where she's,
lying to him,
lying and accepting his vulnerability and only pretending to be equally vulnerable in return. And like I said, there, you look at Evergreen's acting and you can almost look at like these facial micro expressions and think, oh, I wonder if that has something to do with like, what Vesper is really thinking. And I can just, watch those scenes and like, man, there's, you wouldn't think there's so much to unpack there. I didn't think that the first one or two, even three times I saw this movie, but now I'm convinced that this is actually a surprisingly subtle story. So
in the parts that you've picked up on, yes. Mm-hmm. But also, I think because you're a very thoughtful person.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can see why you can extrapolate that from what you watched. Because even though I was saying like, this is what bothered me, because we foolishly had a lot of conversation about this movie before we hit record, and
we just, so much.
And a lot of it was just bugging me, like really, really bugging me. And then when I went off into my own corner of life and was still thinking about it, I was just like, well, wait, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this?
I was so afraid we were blowing through all our good material.
No, trust me, there's still a bunch of stuff that I hadn't say, and I promise you. Wait, no, you said good material. Damn it. Okay. I'm thinking about it. Again, it's a mechanism of we are only given this much information and we want to fill in those blanks because this is what we are talking about. And so it's pretty difficult for me to, I mean, I don't want to give the story credit because really, really bad movies can just have horrible plot holes and I'll just keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. Whereas if like I watched it and I was like not affected whatsoever, it could be well crafted. I was just like, nah, I got enough. I got enough out of the story, so I'm good. So, I mean, credit to the performances, credit to the story. Now for the now, granted, we are running with the story in a love angle, so it's
and before we move on, I did mention I wanted to come back to the Solange relationship. So just related to before, just kind of like the little breadcrumbs that lead to the overall theme or thesis of the movie.
Bad boys.
Yeah, bad boys, and you know, she's like lamenting that she's attracted to bad men like her husband and like Bond, and you know, she had so many chances to be happy with so many nice guys. And yeah, I mean, this part isn't like terribly subtle, but I do think that kind of goes towards this thesis that like intimate relationships are destructive, at least when you're James Bond. That, you know, that Solange ends up dead, as does her husband, and then, you know, Vesper ends up dead too, and you know, for precisely the same reason. You know, Bond is dangerous, and this whole, you know, spies and intrigue world that they live in is dangerous, and I think that's sort of less powerful and less significant than the whole, you know, stripping your armor off thing. But nonetheless, it's like, oh yeah, you know, this is the beginning point, like the beginning points in a line of, you know, people who get close to Bond are going to end up dead, whether that, you know, and that's going to apply as much to friends and allies as to lovers in the future. And we have the voice of M kind of coming in, you know, in case the audience isn't getting the point. She comes in and reprimands him, not very long after that. It's like, yeah, she was tortured before she died. This is because you were poking around. This is what's going to keep happening. You know, M is the authority figure and maybe sort of like the voice of the movie, saying that, like, you know, this is not all just, you know, fun and badassery. This is, you know, a serious plot. You know,
right. All of that, yes, but I would also point out that, from my own perception of this, had she run into, you know, James Bond or not, you know, oh, destruction, you get close to him, you're going to die, or something bad is going to happen to you. That was going to happen to Vesper no matter what. Given the circumstances in which we find out about her at the end of the second movie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's a foregone conclusion that she'd have been killed, but she was, I mean, yeah, and also whether we're considering that.
I didn't say necessarily be killed. I think no matter what, she was going to kill herself.
You think?
I will explain it more in our last segment, but this is what I've been thinking about.
Well, I look forward to hearing about that.
Sure. Okay. So let's go with what the audience is here to actually find out. With a word from our sponsor. No. Okay. You go.
All right.
When did they fall in love?
I think this is one of the rare movies where there could actually be an objectively correct answer to that question, just because
the movie made it happen.
Because the plot kind of depends on
the formula.
Yeah, and the formula. And
I'm already going to disagree with you in advance. Please continue.
And my I was actually leaning toward this being the answer before I put the pieces together, and I kind of thought, like, oh, you know, not only does that, like, emotionally resonate to me as my chosen answer, but also part of the story kind of hinges on the character motivations after that point.
Very important part, the character motivations, is where I stand.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, I look forward to hearing about that too. But my answer is the, like, celebration dinner. Not a dinner, but after Bond has won the card game, and
so hungry.
Yeah, and
rightfully so.
Yes, and he's.
I also have spent long hours gambling and realized, holy shit, I'm hungry.
Yes, and yes, and you get irritable just like Mr. Demetrios. We talked about that. I
want to talk about relationships and seeing your own relationship in a movie.
That was amazing.
Oh
yes,
my God.
Please tell the whole story.
Oh, okay. Well, just in general, like Solange goes up looking gorgeous, by the way, coming in, saying hello to him. Demetrius?
Demetrios, her husband.
Yes, her husband Demetrius
She's very affectionate.
Is very, very focused on the game at hand, and she comes down and she kisses him, and sure enough, he replies with just like, I'm in the middle of something. It's not what he said, but at the same time, it's just like, back off. I'm trying to concentrate. You are ruining my game. And yeah, I am a very focused gambler. So Ryan has, without me, absorbing this movie into our lives the way he has in his, I gamble that way. And when he comes to me at the blackjack table, don't touch me.
out of all of the male fantasies and wish fulfillment in this movie, I don't think being Solange and having the irritable spouse at the gambling table was meant to be one of them. But that's where I am.
Well, I would appreciate it if you would not wear plunging necklines out in public like that.
Only in Nevada.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. That is our rule.
This is the styling.
Yep.
It gets very warm.
Sure. All right. Please continue.
Okay. So the scene is that Bond has just won the card game, and as far as he knows,
the big one,
the big card game, not the one with Dimitrios.
Yes. Although free card.
Right. Yeah. Table stakes. Boy. Bond has just won the big card game, and as far as he knows, Felix Leiter, that's Jeffrey Wright's character, is off apprehending the chief, and he's having some food and beverage. I think it's caviar and a Vesper cocktail, by the way, for those who aren't up on the trivia, that cocktail dates back to the original novel and has become a real life thing that's named after Vesper Lynd. So here, Bond inventing it and then naming after Vesper is one of those cute little meta things. But like I said, I found it to be relatively a light touch. And this is the scene where he says, "I think I'm going to call it a Vesper because it's the only thing I want to drink." That's the quote you dropped at the beginning.
Yeah, I figured it was a little bit better than "the bitch is dead" or whatever he said at the end.
Yeah, and he has definitely dropped hints at his attraction to Vesper before that, but that's one of the, not the earliest, but one of the earlier beats and more of a substantive bond forming between them, no pun intended. We can talk about the shower scene later too, which is not the kind of shower scene that it sounds like. But anyway, getting back to the point, that was where I sort of felt the emotional resonance, and that's also Vesper kind of softening and maybe reconsidering that he Bond isn't just this egomaniac that is reckless and someone that she can't really understand because he's in this world of violence. And I mean the emotional argument for that being the moment that they fell in love is kind of wishy-washy, but I think that is, my best explanation for that is just kind of like I detected a general softening between them. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think maybe a good way to put it is like that's when in the subtext we could see for both of those characters the armor kind of coming off, and they both definitely had the armor up with the kind of like bristliness and banter and such. And then the more objective side of it is we have to put all the pieces together later in the movie, but the very next scene is where Vesper gets abducted and Bond goes after her, and they are rescued through no actions of Bond's owned. It's just Mr. White, the bigger villain who's holding the chief's leash, comes in and kills him because he's lost the ability to get back that money, and he's not worth anything to them anymore. And then James and Vesper are just left behind to survive. And then we find out at the end of the movie it's because Vesper was already in Mr. White's pocket, and she made a deal to save James's life in exchange for embezzling the prize money.
And now that I'm thinking about it, because after watching it, I was under the impression I had to piece together whose pocket she was actually in, because I thought maybe it was Lashif, and White came in at one last minute and she made a deal with him and not her. Because as you're watching the scene and you hear her screaming in the background, I still have my armor up. So I'm just like, yeah, that's possibly a really good show you're putting on, Vesper, if you are still like, oh my God, she got kidnapped. Oh my God, this, and oh my God, who is the betrayer? Because unlike early James Bond, where it's just like, wait, Mathis, and then he runs off. It was Mathis, and then he sees Vesper getting kidnapped. That was definitely Mathis because she's being, that I'm making it up as I go along, but that's how my brain is following the story. So when you're helping me piece together like whose pocket she's in, it just occurred to me that she doesn't have to negotiate very hard because the answer is she can't do anything without James's passcode. So it's not let us live. It's like, dude, I need to get this to a point. We need some time because that money's now locked. I have one half. He has the other half. So I don't think she has to negotiate for his life. It's like, you can't kill us now. You cannot kill us now. So that just occurred to me right now.
Yeah, and that does complicate it, and I won't, put myself up behind a lectern and claim to be able to explain every beat of this movie without ambiguity. But nonetheless, I will sort of lean on.
Well, that also kind of takes away one of the things that I'll be working with in the whole because M's thing is just like, why would they keep you alive? And M was just
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm leaning a bit. And it's like, isn't it obvious she made a deal to save your life, and that's
I mean. No, Em, it's not obvious. It's not obvious to me, but again, I'm coming at it from a different angle.
Yeah. Especially since, he lost consciousness in the presence of the arch villain and then woke up unharmed in a hospital bed.
He was harmed.
Well, not further harmed from the point he lost consciousness. Yes.
He was definitely harmed.
That's what we call a career-ending injury if you're James Bond.
And yet somehow,
well, yes,
we have the greatest technology. If we can take John Travolta's face and put it on Nicolas Cage, we can have James Bond fuck some more.
Something Iron Balls McGinty. I know you left that movie.
Zoom, that went over my head.
The Jerk.
Oh, honey, it's been
okay. Fine.
It's been years. So
where was I?
Well, apparently you had an itch, and
right, yeah. So that, So I stand by that as being like the point where clearly Vesper is meant to have been attached enough to him at that point to prioritize saving his life as opposed to just saving her own skin or negotiating for the life of her supposedly kidnapped Algerian ex-boyfriend, and
probably current boyfriend.
And that's another one of those things under the surface that I find fascinating since you brought it up. That up to some point in her relationship with James, she was thinking I have this man that I love. I can't see him because he's been kidnapped and I'm being blackmailed. And once I've, carried out my betrayal of the British government and secured his release, I'm going to go back to him. And the whole time when she's falling in love with James, she has to be doing the math of is this a betrayal? Am I going to leave my boyfriend for this man? Is it a temporary fling that I'm going to end when I go back to him, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, you can just sit around and wonder about that so much. And
I did.
Oh, good, yeah. And whether the movie, fully plumbs those depths, that's a matter for opinion. I know a lot of people probably reacted to it as a lot shallower than I'm thinking, but I don't know. I just respond to that kind of thing.
And the thing is that information that you provided was the piece of information that M gave at the end, where she had this, this lover that's the reason that she was it. She didn't do it because she was part of Quantum, which we don't find out. She wasn't part of Mr. White and the organization that she's...
Or just plain corrupt or trying to get a cut of the money for herself, et cetera, et cetera.
I don't know, 10% of $120 million, and you carry the one.
Yeah, and that's another one of those what's going through the character's head thing. When, Bond first learns that she's absconding with the money but doesn't yet know the motive, he might be wondering in that moment, has this entire thing been a lie? Has this entire thing just been about hijacking $100+ million for herself?
The musical cue would note as such, especially since M said just hey, where's the money? He's like, oh, we did that already, so clearly it's not where it should be, so she is not on the up and up. So she cannot be trusted.
Right.
Yeah, especially since that was weeks ago, months ago.
A week at minimum, I would think.
Right, because they were definitely frolicking through
enough time for him to be discharged from the hospital and go on vacation in Venice,
and apparently have full use of his nether regions again. And so then again, he did talk about his little finger, so maybe he didn't have full use.
Yeah.
The look on your face is priceless.
I was going to try to say something snarky about sex positivity and different ways of stimulating your partner, heteronormative, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, we're just going to cut all this out.
Okay.
Okay, so can you underline again when they fell in love again? Just tell me when, and then
I think they fell in love when they were celebrating and having a little downtime after the big poker game, because that is the last moment before Vesper made the decision to negotiate to save James's life. And symmetrically with that, James rushing off to rescue her from kidnapping. Not to say that he wouldn't have done that anyway, but you can tell there was a certain personal urgency that goes beyond trying to save an innocent, a fellow government employee.
Yeah. So I'm having a really difficult time with my answer, because I will say, quote, when they fell in love, but at the same time, by what happens next, we'll go into an analysis of her frame of mind that would actually pull back that she didn't fall in love with him. But at the same time, I have to remember this next thought that I had, again, that will come place in the future, that I think she falls in love a lot. I think she falls in too hard, and she was hardened by her lover being kidnapped. But at the same time, I okay, so here's what I'm going to go with, and I'm going to do my best to run with it. Okay, for James, it is after he wakes up after the being tortured and he and her were the only survivors thing. So he has multiple instances where he opens his eyes and she's there, and they comment about that. So I'm going to go with what the script writers were trying to tell us. And so when it happens again, that's where he is. And that's where you see the complete transformation in him. So I'm going to say Winston when he opens his eyes and sees her again.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that's you'd be, massively relieved just to open your eyes and you're not in that basement anymore in the first place. And her being there, that's just, icing on the cake, right?
Not to mention she was the catalyst for why he went in the first place. So there's also this oh my God, betrayal by Mathis. Oh my God, I have to get back to her. Not in just that version of it, but the whole trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. Because she got
and then
into
seeing
that
she's
mess
alive.
as far as he knew, through no fault of her own, and just that she got out okay would have been both a relief. Her being okay and him being okay.
Sure. And for her, again, I can't fully put any of that into place. I mean, come on, she
too many secrets and lies.
So many layers of secrets and where she is. But if I'm to work with this, because she has the secrets and the lies, I think the movie is trying to tell us when she took off the necklace. Is when I might actually say later on that's when she made a decision. But I'm going to say the movie is trying to tell us.
Oh, totally.
If we are to believe that she fell in love with him, it's the part where she took off the necklace, because they're planting it for the later information we're about to receive. Yep. And also, this is the part where she's just like, oh my God, I'm about to do the ultimate thing. I don't know what's going to happen on the other side of it. It's very possible she may have come back to him afterwards and she was putting her heart on the line.
Yeah. I mean, that is a firm blow for the symbolism stick there. So I definitely agree with, that's what the movie is telling us. And yeah, I mean, it's also... there's that line at the end from M that, she must have known she was going to her death.
Which I'll extrapolate with.
Yeah. Which is,
In fact, I have a lot of my brain running. So can I just get as much out of it as I can before I ask you? So the question, what happens next? Well, what happens next is there is a funeral or a spilling of ashes, or he takes the urn and he throws it into his cocktail, and then he cries, and then he pours it down a sink. I don't know, because she's dead. She is dead, and he is now armor piercing. He's now the Michelin Man with his many layers of, tire, and then armor, and then bulletproof, and then Kevlar, and then
I
no one will enjoy these pinkies with my love.
I think I read once that they discontinued one of the ingredients of that cocktail, and so it became impossible to make it unless you had a bottle of that lying around. And if her ashes become an ingredient in the new recipe, that's just even scarcer. That's just, you can only have maybe a few of those.
Right. I got morbid, honey.
The
point I'm trying to make is that
morbid.
This relationship, oddly enough, will not continue, but it will linger. Because,
oddly enough.
I mean, of course, the whole idea behind it is that this relationship was the lasting impact of what made James Bond James Bond.
I think we're in agreement there.
Sure, of course. And the scriptwriters and all of the people who watched it all agree with me now. Here are the hard parts, and this is what I'm grappling with. So I maintain that she falls in love easily. because this person who apparently she was trying to save, she was being blackmailed.
The Algerian boyfriend.
The Algerian boyfriend. I'm sorry. I'm refer to it as the lover.
Sure.
And I'm not going to stop using that word because it's silly when it comes out of my mouth.
Lover.
It's silly when it comes out of my mouth.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. You just sound dorky.
Not the first time you told me that. But
For me, it's very difficult because I'm thinking either she falls in love a lot, in which case she fell in love with him, and then she was willing to... I mean, let's really look at this, shall we? She's being blackmailed by her position. So I am of the belief that she knew from the beginning her life was over when she agreed to do this. Be it she was going to be killed by them if she failed. She was going to be killed by them if she succeeded. She was going to go to prison and she wasn't going to go to prison. So she was going to kill herself. So that's why the whole in the movie, in the positive side of it, she took the necklace off. She was going to put her heart on the line when it was over. That's the one side of it. The thing is, though, I don't think she ever thought that she was going to get anything. And you and I had a disagreement over. She knew no matter what was going to happen. Either she was like okay, so at the end when she's trapped in the
not necessarily a disagreement, but we were talking about why she locked herself in the elevator and intentionally made it impossible for James to rescue her from drowning.
Right, which was very irritating, and I made a Titanic reference where I'm just like, I don't understand. Is it like, no, save yourself. If I kill myself now, then you will have to go save yourself. Like, no, if you hadn't done that, he probably could have gotten you both out inside.
Yeah,
so I'm like,
no, that was a suicide. That wasn't for James's sake.
Okay, right. So that was a suicide. So the thing is, if she's killing herself now, is she killing herself because that was always her intention because of that? Or was she killing herself because she betrayed him? Or was she killing herself because of I still don't get her reasoning. And for me, I think that's why I was like irritated for a really long time.
Yeah.
Because am I irritated because of her motivation, or am I irritated because I don't know the answer?
Yeah, and it's I'm not going to profess to have a super clear answer either, but I do think it's a combination of like she's, betrayed her government. She's, at best going to be a fugitive and a criminal. She doesn't have any kind of life to go back to.
She's funding and supporting terrorism in her actions, even though there is a metaphorical gun to her boyfriend's head.
Yeah, and maybe in the subtext something about, being torn between these two men that she feels split loyalty to, and now that she has paid off, Mr. White and what is eventually called Quantum and all that, she's still trying to save that guy's life. And do we, from the necklace coming off, are we to infer that like she's ready to move on from him emotionally, that she would rather be with James even if that guy came back safe and sound? I'm not going to say like, oh, she killed herself because she felt so guilty about cheating on her boyfriend, or
no, I don't think that was
or anything like that. I mean, you can take that in some like rather sexist and unfortunate directions, which I'm not trying to do. But
it's definitely, I wouldn't have assumed that. I assumed it was because of the funding of terrorism.
Yeah, I think it's
being
like
trapped in this whole thing.
like primarily that, and more in the subtext, the fact that like her attachments and all of the damage that has come from, like, as you were saying, falling in love one after the other, it only leads to destruction and deception. I think she's just kind of a broken person at that point.
She was broken beforehand. Mm-hmm. You remember when she was in the shower and the audience is led to believe it's because she watched somebody die, and she also participated in the first time.
Yeah, interesting.
Okay, so
you don't think that was at face value?
I think it absolutely was at face value, and deeper. Because absolutely, who is not going to freak out at the idea of watching somebody die in real time in front of you? It's like, she's being attacked, so she has that. She watches James suffocate the life out of a person. So she goes upstairs. So not only is she really getting the full stakes of what she is doing with James Bond, period, she's also thinking of the full stakes of what will happen if she fails. And if she succeeds, so if she fails, her lover is dead. If she succeeds, she is, taken part in all of this, but at the same, what is
It's going to have a cost in human life no matter what.
Right.
I mean, like, the best case scenario that she's working towards is it's going to empower terrorists who murder innocent people.
Again, this is a no-win situation for her. So
Yeah.
while she was traumatized by that, she was, traumatized in the larger scale as well. And, here's this person who was there to comfort her and probably, like, again, he actually just did his first couple of kills, so he's still kind of like, rolling off of that as well. When I was rewatching it, I actually misremember what happened. I'm just like, oh God, are they gonna have sex now? Is that the way he's going to heal her? And no, he just put her fingers in his mouth, and that was bad too.
That kind of creep you out.
I didn't care for that.
Yeah, I actually know a little bit of backstory about that scene, but part from like internet trivia and part because I've mentioned this before. I don't remember if I talked about this on the podcast or just on Twitter, but I have this fascination with like reading screenplays for movies that I enjoy and kind of like, oh, what was the initial creative draft? How do you, these things that you eventually know was in a visual medium, how did the person choose to put it into words? And yeah, reading the screen directions for this movie, it kind of like confirmed some of my hypotheses about what the intended subtext was supposed to be. And it does actually kind of inform that scene in the shower too, which, and I'm not gonna say like this makes it better, but it does at least kind of satisfy my curiosity of like the filmmaker's intent that him sucking on her fingers was supposed to be almost like counterintuitively non-sexual. It's like this is a moment where he's just being tender and compassionate and he's not putting the moves on her, and it was just like she literally has blood on her hands or feels like she has blood on her hands. And I think maybe in the script she was supposed to like actually have blood on her hands and he was like literally not figuratively cleaning them off, which I guess would kind of make sense because she grabbed the bad guy's forearm very briefly and maybe could have gotten some blood. But in the final movie, I don't think there were any blood stains there.
Well, she was in the shower long enough to where it probably.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
The other piece of trivia about that scene that kind of informs it is that I think in the original script, she was supposed to have been stripped down to her underwear.
Yes.
And instead she was just wearing her full evening gown, like didn't take off any of her clothes before she got into the shower, which again, kind of, paradoxically makes her seem like more vulnerable just because like, oh, she stepped into the shower fully clothed. She must have been really traumatized.
I'm not going to speak to witnessing somebody die in front of me.
Yeah.
But after a fully exhausting day where I just hit the bed with my clothes on and my shoes on and just like, boom, I'm out. That's what's more realistic of just like, just going into the shower. It's just like, I need a change of temperature. I need something to bring me back to reality because right now I'm just gone.
Yeah.
So her doing it fully clothed with the makeup and all the stuff and all that. Yeah. No, definitely more.
Oh yeah, that was actually another interesting script direction that I remember from the very next scene as they're waking up the next day, and it was actually spelled out in the script that like Bond goes into the other bedroom of the 2-bedroom suite and sees her sleeping in like one half of a bed where the other half is still like kind of like undisturbed, and so it's like it's meant to be a very clear visual signal like they did not sleep in the same bed, that he
in the best
he
case
was gentlemanly,
in the best case scenario he stripped her down because again that's the most comfortable that you can be after like a traumatic evening is not in your matted wet dress thingy. Yeah, again, I've fallen asleep that way with my shoes on and everything. It doesn't mean it's comfortable. So that's a gentleman right there.
It was a very fancy hotel. I'm sure it had some of those like nice bathrobes ready to go or whatever. So. Right,
but I could, from her, the
I don't remember exactly what she was wearing.
She wasn't. That's the point.
Okay.
Well, no, the sheet was up.
Yeah. I mean, she was covered by the blanket. I mean, yeah. Okay.
Sheet.
Sure.
Trust me, I take how comfortable I am with my sheets and blankets very seriously.
You were paying a lot of attention.
I think I was too busy just like trying not to be irritated that I was taking in all the details. I don't know what I'm defending right now.
You're opinionated about hotels. I know this about you.
I judge a hotel by how nice their bathroom is. That matters. So again, I have opinions about her motivations, but that doesn't answer the question what happens next. And if we go by what the franchise is meant to tell us, James Bond is now God, I just had the image of Captain America where like it opens up the big thing that Chris Evans went in all tiny And he got, oh my God, he got the transformation machine going, and then it opens back up, and oh, he's Captain America now. And I'm just like, oh my God, James Bond went through this horrific trauma, and you open up the end credits, and he's James Bond now, which is,
Cue the brass section,
I mean, this was meant to launch a franchise for him to become what the audience already knows him to be. And he's gonna be angry, and he's gonna be like, I'm gonna trust no one. He's not. He is really not gonna trust anybody, which is kind of evidenced in the fact that it's just like Mathis is noted as like, oh, he's a traitor, and I'm just like, oh, I guess we can let Mathis go. No, just because she was guilty, that doesn't mean he's innocent. And
then in the next movie, he trusts Mathis. I mean, how long did that last, right?
I don't know. I'm not going to use that as part of my thing. But
then he died because they got close.
God damn it! Why did he have to make out with Mathis? He knows he kisses his and that he's cursing you. Oh my God! So yeah,
I really don't remember that movie.
We'll see again. I've seen Quantum of Solace, and I've seen Skyfall, and I've seen Spectre, and I actually got mad at the end of Spectre too, not because of this didn't go exactly well enough with the characters. It had so much potential and just fell flat on his face, and I'm just like, who's this bitch he's quitting for? Because I'm just like, wait, didn't we just do this 4 movies ago? That's the much as I remember about Spectre.
Yeah. I mean,
you learned nothing, James Bond.
I guess, yeah, I think that's just an indictment of how Spectre didn't really earn its emotional arc.
Spectre?
Yeah.
Seriously, who did he run off with?
Lea Seydoux? Mr.
Bless you?
Mr. White's daughter?
Daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like how they kept throwing in characters who were the child of blank from this Mission Impossible movie. I'm like, yeah, that's Max Jr. I don't care. Who is this? Was I supposed to read the guide before I watched this?
Which was a very deliberate choice because the rest of the James Bond franchise before Daniel Craig was notable in its lack of continuity. You were lucky to have like one of the support agents like Robinson show up in more than one movie. And and just like Spectre was alarming in like how much continuity it had. I actually found it a little bit off-putting.
Right. You're not Marvel. Stop it.
Yeah. I mean, including because it invoked this movie. There's like a scene. I don't want to get too far off topic, but there's a scene in Spectre where the bad guy is trying to like psychologically unnerve James by showing him a picture of Vesper. I'm like, oh, don't even make me think about Casino Royale right now. I'm gonna get distracted by how good that movie was.
Sure. I mean, I'm gonna go with this. James is gonna be reckless.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna say he trusts no one, and that's gonna result in some really bad times that will not be filmed because it won't be entertaining. Because then it's just going to be the first 10 minutes of this movie over and over again in a loop. He's just like, drowning people in sinks and, not doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there are 007s. Are there 010s? Or are there 010s? I mean, like, okay, so
I think the 00 prefix is I think there's like a single O prefix that comes before that, or
oh, okay.
I think in one of the old movies there was a 0012 because presumably there were more than 9.
But see, that's my next question. Are there supposed to be like 999 of them at any given time?
I don't think that's exactly how it works. No.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say that is, and I'm just going to say he's not going to live very long.
Okay.
Because he is a damaged jackass who licks women when they're traumatized, and it was meant to be heartfelt, but just because she was wearing her clothes, you didn't quite make it, and now he's dead.
Would it make you feel better if there was actually blood that we could see coming off?
No, because it was licking.
He's going to catch an infection.
I was about to say, what disease is he going to get from that? I'm going to say he's going to be reckless in his job, and he's gonna die.
That is fair, and And I just want to stop here to say that I also think, the ways in which this movie didn't fully resonate with you are fair. I'm not trying to invalidate that.
You're more forgiving than I am.
I'm more forgiving about movies in general. That's something we've learned about the two of us. And also, definitely this is a lot more of a guy movie, and, just the kind of other aspects of the subject matter. I can definitely see how it lines up with
angry feminist. I heard you.
Yeah, but seriously, I totally get what you're saying, and yeah, I'm willing to agree to disagree, or call this no accounting for taste kind of thing.
I mean, if this is meant to not be my grandfather's James Bond,
okay,
then he's gonna get killed. Done.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, you want to talk about grit? That's
it's pretty gritty.
I mean. Was there a little voice in your head that like the suspension of disbelief that's just wondering, I wonder if he really is going to retire at the end of this, and then that'll just be the end of the franchise? Like
that would be
that would be not your grandfather's James Bond either. That
would be so amazing if Daniel Craig got so fed up by all the speculation and the bad press about how he was blonde, he's just like, guys, I'm out.
Yeah,
and then it's just like, okay.
He lives happily ever after with Vesper, and I mean you can't accuse that of not being a feel good movie.
No. That's just it though. Is that she still dies at the end?
Oh jeez.
And he's and M's just like, so we'll talk about your resignation. He's like, no, I'm still resigned. I'm fucking done.
I'm entirely too traumatized by that.
I'm fucking done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do
you have any?
I would have to respect that as a storytelling choice. I'll say that. So
I'm going to take my Sony Ericsson phone and I'm going to drive off in my.
Okay, so my what happens after?
If
so
you have any.
I do. I am willing to engage in the exercise of what if this movie were the only thing in its own continuity, but I don't even feel like I have to, because I think my answer is perfectly compatible with the movies that come after anyway. And
hang on, my Omega watch says that we're out of time. Please continue.
That as I've made clear up to this point, I think the movie was kind of establishing its own thesis of how this was a growth story of, James learning to have the kind of detachment that, for better or worse, is necessary in order to do what he does. And, that if, you keep doing a thing, etc. There was a repeated line about that. I'm not going to try to quote it. But, so at the end, he has, become the detached person, the half monk, half hitman that came up in that early dialogue with M, and
bulletproof monk.
Yeah, sure. and yeah, Solange's death was lesson number one. Vesper's death was lesson number two, and I think it's not just about how to be a more effective spy, but also how to ideally avoid getting people killed whom you don't mean to. And if we're meant to infer that he not only became, a colder, harder person after this, but also a more effective person who's maybe going to be a little bit better at saving lives, which is what he wants to be doing, that he's going to go through the rest of his career as a secret agent, probably still indulging in lust and hooking up with women, but not getting that level of emotional attachment that would lead him to do something as crazy as, submit a resignation and get $100 million embezzled. Okay, we're late in the show, so I'm not going to try to untangle all that. However, I also think part of the thesis of the movie is that it was growth that needed to happen. We learn at the beginning that he didn't find himself in this line of work because he was a sociopath, because he finds it natural to kill and lie to people and exploit women, and that he was shaken up and had a fairly human reaction to that first man that he had to kill in the opening fight scene, and that kind of suggests to me that he has this kernel of humanity that he's learning. What he's learning is how to cover it up or set it aside. And I think that, his career, for as long as it lasts, is only going to last so long. And I'm going to choose not to think that he eventually gets killed in action, but just because I like the story better that way. And if it leads up to a retirement, I think there's going to be a gradual letting go of that, to kind of returning to the person he was before he was a spy. And, because of what he went through with Vesper, that's going to mean allowing himself to fall in love again, possibly with a sensibly middle-aged woman at that point. And
He'll be in his 90s and she'll be middle-aged.
Yeah, I mean,
That's how these are usually cast.
yeah, like Monica Bellucci was a Bond girl, like notably over the age of 50, I think. So I mean, that's kind of that could
but
be.
he's not going to marry her.
That was still not her. Maybe someone like her. I don't know.
I was making a point about the age differences.
Yeah, I know. Which is and I think the Craig movies at least average a little bit less of a gap, and I don't know. I'd have to go look up the actual numbers, but at least it felt a bit less weird than at least like the Roger Moore again. Oh God, that friggin' View to a Kill movie that.
Okay, but
That woman was so young.
But
and
how
he was like 70.
But
Sorry.
how do you do the calculation when M is a Bond girl?
Oh, that she was the second Bond girl in Skyfall. That's an easy.
No, I know that, but I'm just saying numbers wise.
It's going to drag the average up. Yeah. Listen to my upcoming podcast about how M was the Bond girl in Skyfall. That's a controversial opinion. But anyway, if I could finish my... I think this all leads to, Bond is going to retire one day. That's going to be the moment where, he allows himself to love again, which I do think actually mirrors, Vesper's, taking off of the necklace. That was, kind of a letting go of the past moment. It was, I believe she just said it was time, and it'll be time for him eventually. Mm-hmm. And he can stop being a half monk, half hitman.
Oh, okay. To be fair, though, he didn't keep the necklace after Quantum of Solace, so.
Huh?
She took off the necklace, and that was her moment, and so never mind. That was just a bad...
Are we talking about the literal necklace?
The literal necklace. I was making a bad observation.
Did she leave it in the hotel room, or... Okay.
He has it with him at the end of Quantum of Solace.
Oh, yeah, and the little bag of stuff with the evidence on the cell phone, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
So,
fair enough.
But that...
If he just went around wearing a woman's necklace over his tie for the rest of the franchise, I would be.
Okay, in his job though, that's just asking for it to be used to strangle him.
Yeah, or at the very least to identify him. It's going to be in all the bad guy dossiers. No matter what he says his name is, if he's wearing this one weird looking necklace.
But then again, the Algerian boyfriend was handing them out like candy. So
yeah. That was his MO. Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else you want to cover?
No, I think I got that. I mean, and I got to cover that, agree to disagree on the movie. I wish you would enjoyed it more, but I think we've come to a very good understanding on, the differences in taste. And I hope at the very least you'll agree with my observation that, there's a lot of subtext and implication going on. Mm-hmm. It seems like you were, at the very least, having as much fun diving into all that as I was. So
in the end, even though I still had all of these thoughts about it and I was acting in rage mode,
rage seems a bit harsh, but
I'm trying to make it so where I'm using hyperbole so that way you defend me.
Oh, okay.
Haha, you fell into my trap.
Juicing up the podcast drama.
You take that back. That's ultimately we got to have an enjoyable discussion about it. So yes. I would say I have accomplished my goal.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much. In the last of my notes, I want to point out, just in the romance tropes elements of that, you've definitely got, you definitely have a fake relationship. You have the forced proximity and the whole shared bedroom thing where she's just like, oh, well, unfortunately, we're going to have a 2-bedroom suite because in our fake relationship, I'm a Catholic and all this other stuff. So my parents would never allow it. So I just think it's funny that wow, this is what they're doing is an actual premise of a romance movie of a romance novel very easily. So
yeah,
I think it's funny that they put that in there and parkour
and poker.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Well, thank you
for having me here.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I'm taking a little bit of a social media break, but if you had any thoughts about this, you can definitely hit me up by email at contact@HEAMCast.com. Ryan, are you lingering on social media anywhere?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is just my full name, and you can find me replying and retweeting to the HEAMCast account. So if you want to @ me there, I'll be happy to hear from you.
Thanks again for joining me.
Yeah, thank you too.
All right. Until next time, may your aftermath be happy.